My son and his wife showed up at my front door with a lawyer and a doctor. That was 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday that felt deceptively like a victory. 11 years ago, they'd abandoned their 6-year-old daughter, Maya, on my porch like an unwanted package, a surplus variable in their chaotic equation, and disappeared into the shimmering heat of a mid-July afternoon. They left her because she was too quiet, too strange, a cipher they lacked the patience to decode. They were wrong. They were looking at the casing, not the engine. By 17, Maya had designed a quantitative algorithm so powerful, so intuitively brilliant, that a Wall Street hedge fund licensed it for $4.1 million. Then the local business journal covered the story. It was a fluff piece, really. Local prodigy cracks the code, complete with a photo of Maya looking uncomfortable and me beaming with a pride that felt dangerously like hubris. 2 weeks later, my doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the house I had kept silent and safe for so long. David, my son, and his wife Sarah were standing there. They brought a man in a 3-piece suit that cost more than the structural renovations on my roof, and another man clutching a worn medical bag that smelled of antiseptic and betrayal. They didn't bring flowers. They didn't bring apologies. They brought documents. Not custody papers. Conservatorship papers. A psychiatrist's report, dozens of pages thick, bound in heavy blue cardstock. It claimed that I, Evelyn Hayes, 72 years old, former senior systems engineer for Lockheed Martin, a woman who had calculated the drag coefficients for orbital reentry vehicles, was suffering from early-onset dementia. It claimed I was financially confused, spatially disoriented, and exerting undue influence on my genius granddaughter. They were petitioning for emergency control of her assets and my life. Our lawyer, Helen, a woman who usually ate steel for breakfast and flossed with barbed wire, reviewed the file and turned the color of ash. "Evelyn," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "this report is thorough. It has dates, transcripts, video clips, expert testimony. It paints a picture of a woman losing her grip on reality. Structural failure, Evelyn. We might lose this." I panicked. It wasn't a scream. It was a cold, hydraulic pressure crushing my chest. My mind raced, spinning through variables, trying to calculate an escape trajectory, but every route ended in a wall. I felt the old familiar hum of anxiety, the vibration of a system pushed past its yield point. I looked at Maya. She just sat there, watching them. Her face was a mask of perfect, terrifying calm. She leaned over, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "Let them, Grandma. I've been running a different kind of algorithm." I stared at her. We were about to lose everything. Her future, my dignity, our home, and she wanted them to keep lying? But she was already pulling up files on her laptop, her fingers dancing over the keys in a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. I had no idea what she was about to do, but for the first time in 11 years, I realized I wasn't the only engineer in the room. My name is Evelyn Hayes. I'm 72 years old, and this is my story. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of people who know that you're never too old and never too female to fight for your family. Now back to the story. Part 1. The Drop. June 2014. David and Sarah showed up on a scorching afternoon in June 2014. The air was thick enough to chew, the kind of humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin the second you step outside. It was the type of heat that makes engines overheat and tempers snap, where the asphalt shimmers like a mirage and the cicadas scream in the trees. I was in the kitchen, kneading dough. Since retiring, I had replaced fluid dynamics with baking. There was something comforting about the chemistry of it. Yeast plus sugar plus heat equals rise. It was predictable, a closed system. I heard the car first. It wasn't a smooth arrival. It was the crunch of tires on gravel, followed by the distinct, metallic rattle of a loose muffler. A beat-up Honda, the clear coat peeling like sunburned skin, reversed halfway up my driveway and stalled. I wiped my hands on my apron, leaving streaks of flour like war paint, and stepped out onto the porch. David got out first. He looked thinner than I remembered, his face drawn, his eyes darting around the yard as if looking for an exit strategy before he'd even engaged. Sarah stood by the passenger door, lighting a cigarette with a jagged, nervous motion. She looked worn down, eroded by a life that hadn't given her what she thought she was promised. She took a drag and flicked the ash onto my driveway, a tiny act of disrespect that told me everything I needed to know about her state of mind. And then, from the back seat, Maya emerged. She was 6 years old, but she looked smaller. She was wearing a t-shirt that was 2 sizes too big and shorts that had seen better days. She stood staring at a crack in the walkway where an ant was struggling with a crumb 3 times its size. She was holding a spiral notebook and a pencil that had been sharpened down to a nub. She hadn't spoken in 6 months. That was the last update I'd received before the phone call stopped. Selective mutism, the social worker had called it, a system shutdown. "Just for a few weeks, Mom," David said, walking up the path but stopping 10 feet away. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was looking at the hydrangeas, the peeling paint on the garage, the neighbor's cat, anywhere but at the mother he was about to burden. "We just need to get on our feet, find a new place. The market is tough right now, you know how it is." "David," I said, my voice steady despite the sudden tachycardia in my chest. "What is going on? Where are you staying?" "We'll call you Sunday." He was already turning away, walking fast, his shoulders hunched against a guilt I hoped he felt, though I suspected he was immune to it by now. He didn't hug Maya. He didn't touch her hair or squeeze her shoulder. He didn't offer a single reassuring gesture to the child he was abandoning. He just got in the car. Sarah crushed her cigarette under her heel, leaving a black smudge on the concrete, and slid into the passenger seat. The car sputtered to life. I watched the beat-up Honda reverse out of the driveway, the muffler rattling a loose, metallic cough. It was a sound of decay, of negligence. Maya hadn't moved. She was just still. I stood there, the heat pressing down on me, looking at this child. I'd been an aerospace engineer for 40 years. I built guidance systems. I understood stress tolerances, load-bearing equations, and aerodynamic drag. I dealt in absolutes, in physics, in problems that had answers if you just worked the math long enough. I knew nothing about 6-year-old girls, and even less about one who wouldn't speak. "Hey, Maya," I said softly, trying to modulate my voice, to strip out the panic and leave only calm frequencies. "It's hot out here. Want to come inside? The air conditioning is on." She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the car disappearing down the street. She just clutched her notebook to her chest like a shield, a physical barrier between her and the world. I walked down the steps, my joints popping, a reminder as my own structural wear and tear, and picked up her suitcase. It was sitting on the walkway. It was pink, with a broken zipper, and it was light, horrifyingly light. How do you pack a human life into something that weighs less than a bag of flour? It felt less like luggage and more like an afterthought. It felt like debris. "Come on," I said, gesturing to the open door. I walked inside and waited. I counted the seconds, a habit from the lunchroom. T-10, T-9. After a full minute, she walked past me into the house. Her eyes were wide, scanning the environment for threats. She looked at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. She looked at the photos on the mantel. The central air conditioner kicked on with a low mechanical hum. She flinched, her shoulders rising toward her ears. Then, the grandfather clock in the hall, a relic from my husband Robert's family, A beautiful, towering thing of mahogany and brass chimed the hour. Bong, bong, bong. Maya dropped the notebook. She pressed her hands over her ears, screwing her eyes shut, her mouth opening in a silent cry. She vibrated with terror. I quickly closed the door, cutting off the heat, and moved toward the clock to stop the pendulum, but she had already bolted. She scrambled into the living room and crouched in the corner by the fireplace, the one spot Robert had always said was too dark for reading. It was a defensive position. Walls on two sides, a clear view of the entrance. She was fortifying herself. "It's okay," I said, keeping my distance. "It's just a clock. It marks the time. It's a machine, Maya. Just gears and springs." She didn't uncover her ears. I went to the kitchen. My hands were trembling. I needed a task. I needed a protocol. Hydration. I poured cold water into a glass. I brought it to the living room and set it on the floor, sliding it toward her across the hardwood until it was an arm's length away. I respected her perimeter. "I'll leave this here," I said. I went back to the kitchen and watched her from the doorway, hidden by the angle of the wall. After 5 minutes, she reached out, took the glass, and drank. She stared at the condensation beading on the glass, tracing the droplets with her finger. She wasn't just drinking, she was studying the fluid dynamics of the water. That first night was a lesson in failure. I made macaroni and cheese, the orange kind from the box. I assumed this was the universal constant of childhood, the comfort food baseline. I'd put the bowl on the table. Maya climbed onto the chair. She looked at the bowl. She poked a noodle with her spoon. The cheese sauce was viscous, bright orange. She looked at me, then pushed the bowl away with a definitive shove. "You don't like mac and cheese?" I asked. She shook her head. I tried a peanut butter sandwich. I cut the crusts off with surgical precision, creating a perfect square. She looked at the bread. She touched the sticky peanut butter leaking from the side. She wiped her finger on her shirt and pushed the plate away. "Maya, you have to eat," I said, my frustration leaking into my voice. "The system needs fuel. You can't run on empty." She stared at the wall. Her silence was a physical weight in the room. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the air. Finally, desperate, I opened the pantry. I saw a box of plain Cheerios. Low sugar, boring, geometric. I put a bowl of dry Cheerios in front of her. No milk. She looked at them. Toroids, perfect circles. She ate them, one by one. She picked each loop up with her thumb and forefinger, inspected it for structural defects, then placed it in her mouth. It wasn't eating, it was processing. She ate 2 bowls, methodically, rhythmically. Bedtime was worse. I showed her the guest room. It used to be my sewing room, where I mended Robert's shirts and hemmed my work slacks. I had put clean sheets on the bed, crisp cotton that smelled of lavender. "Here we go," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Big bed." I tried to tuck the quilt around her, a quilt I'd made myself, a patchwork of blues and grays. She recoiled. She scrambled to the far side of the queen-sized bed, her back pressed against the wooden headboard, her knees pulled to her chest. Her eyes were wide, terrified, like an animal cornered in a trap. I froze. "Okay," I said, backing away, holding up my hands in surrender. "Okay, Evelyn. Message received. Boundary violation." I left the blanket at the foot of the bed. It's there if you need it. I backed out of the room and left the door open a crack so the hallway light would slice through. I went to my own room, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. Scritch, scritch. Pause, scritch. The sound of graphite on paper. She was awake. She was writing. I got up and crept to the doorway. She was sitting in the middle of the rug, illuminated by the moonlight coming through the window. She had her notebook open. She was drawing lines. Perfectly straight lines, over and over again, creating a grid. She wasn't drawing a picture. She was imposing order on a blank page. I went back to bed, my heart aching. I realized then that she wasn't just quiet. She was trying to control a chaotic world the only way she knew how. Saturday morning, I called David. The phone rang once, then clicked. A recording. The number you have reached is disconnected or no longer in service. I tried Sarah's cell. Disconnected. I felt a cold prickle of dread at the base of my neck. It was the sensation of a system warning light flashing red. I went to the computer and emailed them. I checked their Facebook pages. Deleted. I called the friend David said they were staying with, a man named Steve, who I'd met once at a barbecue years ago. "I haven't seen them in a month, Mrs. Hayes," Steve said, his voice sounding annoyed. "They owe me $400. If you hear from them, tell them I'm selling David's tools." 1 week became 2. The reality set in like concrete hardening. They weren't coming back on Sunday. I took Maya to our old family pediatrician, Dr. Evans. He was nearing 80 himself, a man who had treated David for chickenpox 30 years ago. He examined her gently, checking her reflexes, her throat, her ears. Maya was compliant, limp like a doll. "It's selective mutism, Evelyn," he said later, scrubbing his hands at the sink. "It's trauma-induced. She's not hurt physically, but psychologically, she's locked in. She's decided the world isn't safe enough to share her voice with. She'll speak when she feels safe." "How do I make her feel safe?" I asked, clutching my purse. "I'm an engineer, John. I fix systems. I replace faulty circuits. Give me a protocol. Give me a manual." He smiled sadly. "There is no manual for this. Patience and routine. Don't push her. Let her be." So I didn't push. I recalibrated. I treated Maya like a volatile chemical compound that required absolute stability. I enrolled her in therapy, though she just sat in the chair and drew intricate geometric shapes while the therapist tried to use puppets to elicit a response. I established a rigid protocol at home. Wake up, 07:30. Breakfast, 2 hard-boiled eggs, boiled for exactly 9 minutes to ensure no gray ring around the yolk, and dry toast, cut into 4 precise squares. Nothing touching. 08:30. Reading time. 1200. Lunch. Sandwiches, cut diagonally, crusts removed. I learned the route to the therapist had to be exactly the same. Once, 3 weeks in, I tried a shortcut down Elm Street to avoid road work. As soon as I turned the blinker on, Maya started hyperventilating in the back seat. She rocked back and forth, hitting her head against the car door. Thump, thump, thump. I immediately U-turned. Okay, Maya, reverting to primary course, reverting." She stopped the moment we were back on the familiar road. I never took a shortcut again. I learned not to touch her. No hugs, no pats on the head, no brushing hair out of her eyes. I learned to talk to her, even if she didn't answer back. I treated her like a silent colleague in the lab. I'd sit on the porch in the evenings with a glass of iced tea and read my old engineering journals aloud, mostly to keep myself sane, but also to fill the silence with something other than pity. "Listen to this, Maya," I'd say, adjusting my reading glasses. "The drag coefficient acts as a parasitic force on the lift capabilities during the transonic phase. Fascinating, isn't it? It's all about resistance. You have to push back against the air to fly." She'd sit on the bottom step, 10 feet away, writing in her notebook. She never looked up. But I noticed that when I read the technical jargon, when I read the numbers, her pencil moved slower. She stopped flinching. The math was a lullaby. 2 weeks after she arrived, I found her in the living room at dawn. The sun was just bleeding through the curtains, casting long, dusty beams across the carpet. She was on the floor, surrounded by my old college textbooks. I had kept them on a high shelf, a shrine to my past life. Applied thermodynamics, statics and dynamics, calculus 2, advanced differential equations. I froze in the doorway, watching. She had arranged them in a semicircle around her. I squinted, trying to understand the pattern. They weren't arranged by size. They weren't arranged by color. Then I realized they were arranged by mathematical complexity, from basic algebra up to nonlinear dynamics. She had opened Calculus 2. She couldn't read the text, she was 6, but she was staring at the equations. I sat on the couch, my joints popping. That's impressive, Maya. She didn't look at me. She just pointed to a new notebook on the coffee table. Graph paper. I'd bought it for her on a whim at the drugstore because she had filled the spiral one. She had already filled half of it, not with drawings of houses or flowers, with numbers, columns of them, sequences. I picked it up. It was a Fibonacci sequence. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, written in shaky, childish handwriting, but perfectly accurate up to 3 digits. "You like the patterns?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just turned the page of the textbook to a graph showing a sine wave. She traced the curve with her finger. December came. The holidays approached like a threat. David and Sarah were ghosts. I'd accepted it in the way you accept a chronic ache or a permanent malfunction in a secondary system. I was 61 years old, a widow, and I was raising a 6-year-old girl who wouldn't speak. On Christmas Eve, I was on the floor of the garage. It was freezing. My breath came out in white puffs. I was wrestling with a bicycle I'd bought her. The instructions were written by someone who clearly hated humanity and had no concept of spatial geometry. I was swearing at a diagram of a derailleur that made no sense. "Insert bolt A into slot B. There is no slot B," I yelled, throwing the wrench. It clattered against the concrete. The phone in the kitchen rang. I scrambled up, wiping grease on my jeans, running for it. My heart hammered. Maybe it was them. Maybe they were coming. "Hello? Dad?" It was David. I stopped breathing. "David? It's Mom, Evelyn." "Right, Mom, sorry." His voice sounded tinny, hollow. There was wind in the background. "David, where are you? It's Christmas Eve. When are you coming to get her? She needs—" "I can't, Mom. We're not coming back." His voice was flat, devoid of affect. "It's better this way. We're a mess. And she's just too quiet, you know? It's weird. She freaks Sarah out. I can't handle it." "David, you cannot do this," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in years. "She is your daughter. She is a child. You are abdicating your primary function." "She's better off with you. You like quiet things. You like fixing things. She's a broken thing, Mom. You fix her." The line went dead. I called back. "The number is no longer in service." I stood there in the kitchen, the phone in my hand, the silence of the house rushing in to fill the space David had left. The grease on my hands felt sticky and cold. The smell of the half-baked cookies in the oven suddenly made me nauseous. The whole world just caved in. My knees gave out, and I slid down the cabinet to the floor. Maya appeared in the doorway. She was wearing her flannel pajamas with little rocket ships on them. She looked at me for a long moment. Her expression didn't change. She didn't cry. She didn't look surprised. She walked over, her small bare feet silent on the linoleum. She sat down next to me. She didn't touch me. She didn't hug me. She just opened her notebook, tore out a clean sheet of graph paper, and handed it to me. I looked at the paper. The grid lines were perfect, orderly, rational. I looked at her. She got up and went back to the living room. I sat there on the kitchen floor with a sheet of graph paper and a heart that felt like it had been ripped out. And I cried. I cried for the son I had raised who had turned into a stranger. I cried for the little girl who had already figured out that people leave. I cried until my chest hurt, until the grease from the bicycle was smeared on my face like war paint. Then I wiped my face, I folded the graph paper, and put it in my pocket. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. New parameters. We proceed. Part 3. The Signal. Ages 7 to 9. The years after that settled into a rhythm, a quiet, binary rhythm. I kept everything the same for Maya. Same breakfast, same route to school, same dinner time. I read my books on the porch, she did her math. When I kept things consistent, the variables controlled, she was okay. She was safe. When she turned 7, she became obsessed with the stock market pages in the Wall Street Journal I still subscribed to. She'd spread them out on the floor, tracking them in her notebooks. Not the company names, just the numbers. Ticker symbols, prices, volume. I watched her one afternoon. She wasn't reading the news. She was looking for anomalies. Then she started writing notes. She'd leave a piece of graph paper on the table. Need milk. Therapy at 4. Tylenol for your knee. I looked at the last note. My knee had been hurting, a low-level throb I hadn't mentioned to anyone. She had noticed my gait change. She was observing everything. At 8, she was writing full sentences. We'd sit at the dinner table and pass a notebook back and forth. It was the strangest, most wonderful conversation I'd ever had. She was funny on paper. Dry, sarcastic, observant. Mrs. Gable wears too much perfume, she wrote one night. It smells like synthetic lilacs and desperation. I laughed so hard I choked on my tea. But she still hadn't spoken. Not a word. One morning in spring, when she was 9, I was making breakfast. Eggs and toast. The ritual. The sun was shining, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. Maya sat at the table with her notebook, writing furiously. Her brow was furrowed. B flat. The voice was tiny, raspy, like a door hinge that hadn't been opened in years. It was a sound of disuse. I nearly dropped the spatula. I froze, staring at the eggs bubbling in the water. I turned around slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, the moment would shatter. Maya was looking at the small radio on the counter. The refrigerator hum, she said, her voice gaining a millimeter of strength. It's a B-flat. It's annoying. It clashes with the radio song, which is in G major. 3 years. 3 years of silence, and she starts with pitch correction. I sat down across from her, my heart hammering against my ribs. She looked at her notebook, refusing to make eye contact. Did they leave? She whispered, the words barely audible. Because I'm broken? I felt the air leave the room. The question hung there, heavy and jagged. I got up, finished making breakfast, put her plate in front of her. Squares, not touching. Then I went to the garage, picked up a hammer, and hit the workbench as hard as I could. Once. Twice. The wood splintered. I needed to destroy something so I wouldn't scream. I came back in, washed my hands, and sat down. No, sweetheart, I said, my voice rough. I reached across the table, not touching her, just letting my hand rest near hers on the placemat. You are not broken. Your operating system is just more advanced than theirs. They left because they are broken. They lacked the capacity to understand you. She nodded once. She wrote something in her notebook. Capacity failure. Then she started to eat. She'd spoken. She'd asked the one question I didn't know how to answer. But I told her the truth. That's all I had. The truth, hard-boiled eggs, and graph paper. A year later, the school called. It was September 2017. Maya was 10. Mrs. Hayes, we need to discuss Maya's placement, the principal, Mrs. Gable, said. Her voice was dripping with that bureaucratic condescension that always made my teeth ache. What's the problem? I asked, my hackles rising. Her grades are perfect. It's her social development. She refuses to speak in class unless forced. She spent recess analyzing the geometry of the swing set instead of playing tag. We think she needs the special resource room for children with limitations. I gripped the phone. She doesn't have limitations. She has standards. Mrs. Hayes, we're having an IEP meeting on Friday. We need to be realistic. She is disrupting the learning environment by being uncooperative. I spent 3 days preparing. I went into full engineer mode. I treated this meeting like a design review for a faulty thruster. I printed every report card, every therapy note, every standardized test score. Maya's reading was post-high school. Her math was off the charts. Literally, she had maxed out the district's assessment software. The meeting was in a small, airless conference room that smelled of stale coffee and dry erase markers. Mrs. Gable, the school psychologist, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked barely out of college, and the special ed coordinator sat on one side, a wall of bureaucracy. I sat on the other, with my binder. Maya is isolated, Mr. Henderson said, tapping a pen. She engages in repetitive behaviors. She seems to be scaffolding, memorizing formulas she doesn't understand to mask her confusion. It's a coping mechanism. Scaffolding? I pulled out a sheet of paper from my bag. This is from yesterday. I slid it across the table. This is Maya correcting your math teacher's calculation of the area of a trapezoid. He forgot to average the parallel sides. She didn't just correct it, she derived the proof for why his formula would result in structural collapse if applied to a bridge. The room went silent. Mrs. Gable picked up the paper. She squinted at the equations. She's bored, I said, my voice steel. She is not delayed. She is bored to tears. You put her in that resource room and you will kill her light. You will dampen the signal until there is nothing left but static. Put her in the 8th grade pre-algebra class. Give her a quiet space to work, or I will sue this district for educational malpractice so fast your heads will spin. They looked at each other. They saw a gray-haired woman in a cardigan, but they heard the Lockheed engineer who used to stare down generals when they asked for physics to be ignored. Well, try the advanced placement, Mrs. Gable said, sliding the paper back. But if she fails, she won't. That night, Maya watched me organize the paperwork at the dining room table. What are you doing? She asked. She was speaking more now, though usually only to me. Building a defense system, I said. Documentation is armor, Maya. Never forget that. She walked over. Your filing system is inefficient. You should cross-reference by date and subject matter, not just by source. She took the binder. In 10 minutes, she reorganized the entire thing. It was beautiful, logical, color-coded. That's amazing, Maya, I said. She shrugged. It's just data. Data is easy. People are hard. When she was 13, she discovered the fraud. I had given her my old financial records to practice her data organization. She asked for David's old mail, the collection notices I'd thrown in a box in the attic, unable to look at them, but unable to throw them away. Why? I asked. I want to see the pattern of the debt, she said. I want to see the trajectory of the failure. She scanned everything, thousands of pages. She built a database on the computer I bought her, a powerful machine with 3 monitors that heated up her bedroom like a furnace. One evening, she called me into her room. The glow of the screens illuminated her face, making her look like a ghost in the machine. Lines of code cascaded down one screen, a complex web of graphs dominated another. I want to show you Veritas, she said. What is it? It's an algorithm. It doesn't predict stock prices. It predicts lies. Lies? Financial lies, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. It looks for the negative space, the money that isn't there but should be, the phantom variables. She clicked a mouse. I ran David's data. She didn't call him Dad anymore, just David. He has 3 credit cards, maxed, a defaulted car loan. But look here. She pointed to a jagged line on the graph. Every time he defaults, he opens a new account under a slightly different variation of his name, David J. Hayes, D. James Hayes. But look at the dates. She overlaid the dates of his defaults with the dates of my birthdays? No, she said, not birthdays, dates when he visited us. See? 2012, 2013, 2014. I stared at the screen. He stole from you, Grandma, she said softly. Before he dropped me off, he took checks from your checkbook, small amounts, under the radar. Veritas found them. I felt sick. My son, a thief. Why are you doing this, Maya? I asked, watching the code reflect in her eyes. She turned to me, her expression old and tired. Because variables like him don't disappear. They orbit. And eventually, the orbit decays. He'll come back. I want to be ready. She was building a weapon. She wasn't just organizing data, she was manufacturing ammunition. Maya was 16 when she finished Veritas. She entered it into a FinTech Innovation Challenge in New York. She won. I took her to the city. It was sensory overload. The noise, the smells, the sheer volume of humanity. But Maya navigated it like a submarine in deep water, silent and purposeful. We met Julia Brandt, the CEO of a massive hedge fund. Julia was a shark in a silk blouse, a woman who smelled of money and power. She listened to Maya explain the code, asking brutal questions about false positives and latency. Maya answered every one without blinking. Brandt licensed it, $4.1 million. The money went into a trust. I was the trustee, but it reverted to Maya at 18. The local paper ran the story. Teen genius solves Wall Street's problem. 3 weeks later, the doorbell rang. I was in the living room, reading. It was a Tuesday. The sun was shining. It was a perfect day to be ruined. I opened the door. David and Sarah stood there. David looked heavier, softer, his face puffy with what looked like cheap alcohol and sleepless nights. He wore a polo shirt that was too tight. Sarah was wiry, vibrating with nervous energy, her eyes scanning past me into the house. But it was the other 2 men who terrified me. Stephen Vance, the lawyer. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a shark in a cheap suit. And Dr. Alpert, the psychiatrist, who looked like a kind grandfather from a storybook, holding a leather bag. "Mom," David said, "can we come in?" I gripped the doorframe. "What do you want?" "We're worried about you," David said. "We heard things." "I haven't spoken to you in 11 years, I said. "Go away." "Mrs. Hayes," Vance said, stepping forward. He put a polished shoe in the door jamb. "We have a court order for a welfare check and a medical evaluation." I wanted to slam the door, I wanted to scream, but Maya was behind me. "Let them in," she said. Her voice was cool, detached. We sat at the dining table. Vance opened his briefcase. The sound of the latches clicking was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Mrs. Hayes," Vance began, his voice oily, "David and Sarah are deeply concerned about your health. They've received reports." "Reports from who?" I demanded. "Neighbors, observations." He waved a hand vaguely. "Dr. Alpert is here to assess." "I'm fit as a fiddle," I said. "I do the Sunday crossword in pen. I manage my own portfolio." "Dr. Alpert disagrees," Vance said, sliding the report across the table. I read it. My hands started to shake. It detailed incidents I didn't remember. Getting lost in the grocery store, I had stopped to read a label on a new type of flour. Forgetting to pay a bill, I was one day late because the website was down. It claimed I was paranoid, hostile, and suffering from agitated dementia. "This is fiction," I whispered. "This is a lie." "It is a clinical diagnosis," Dr. Albert said softly. "Evelyn, early onset dementia is nothing to be ashamed of, but you can't care for a minor, especially one with special needs and significant assets." "Dad, we just want to help," David said. He reached for my hand. I pulled it away as if he were burning. "You want the money," I said. "You saw the news. You saw the $4.1 million. "That hurts, Mom," David said, putting a hand over his heart. "We're her parents. We love her." "You abandoned her," I shouted, standing up. "You left her like garbage. You haven't called. You haven't sent a card." "See," Vance said to the doctor, pointing at me. "Agitation, paranoia, inability to regulate emotion. Classic symptoms." Dr. Alpert nodded and scribbled in his notebook. They were gaslighting me, professional, high-stakes gaslighting. They were going to take Maya. They were going to take the money, and they were going to put me in a home where I would rot. "We have filed for emergency conservatorship," Vance said. "The hearing is tomorrow. We suggest you don't contest it. It will be easier on everyone. We can find a very nice facility for you, Evelyn, one with a garden." I looked at Maya. She was watching David. She wasn't looking at his face. She was looking at his watch. She was looking at the lawyer's shoes. She was analyzing the data. "We'll see you in court," she said. That night was a vigil. I called Helen, my estate lawyer. She came over immediately, wearing a tracksuit and looking ready to kill someone. We sat at the kitchen table. Helen read the report. "This is bad, Evelyn," she said. "This doctor, Alpert, he's a hired gun. He specializes in competency hearings for wealthy seniors. He never finds anyone competent." "But it's lies," I said. "Look at this video clip." Vance had provided a flash drive. We plugged it into the laptop. It showed grainy footage from my porch camera. It was me. I was wandering in the yard at night, wearing my robe. I looked confused. I was turning in circles. "I remember this," I said, pointing at the screen. "This was last week. Mittens got out. I was looking for the cat. I was calling, 'Mittens, get down here.' See, I'm looking up at the tree." "There's no audio," Helen said. "They stripped the audio. Without the audio, you just look lost." "And this one?" Me yelling at the mailman. "Watch the flowers," I had yelled, because he was backing his truck into my prize hydrangeas. In the video, the truck was cropped out. It was just me, screaming at a man in a uniform, angry, unhinged. "They hacked my security system," I said, feeling cold. "They've been watching us." "They're building a narrative," Helen said, "and in family court, narrative wins. If the judge thinks you're a danger, she'll give temporary custody to the parents. Once they have custody, they control the trust. By the time we fight it, The money will be in the Cayman Islands. I put my head in my hands. I can't lose her, Helen. She's my life. Maya was in her room. The door was closed. The hum of her computer fans was loud enough to hear in the hall. She hadn't come out for dinner. I went to her door. Maya? Come in. She was sitting in the dark, illuminated by the blue light of 3 monitors. Are you okay? I asked. I'm running simulations, she said. Current probability of victory with standard defense, 12%. That low? The medical report carries a weight of 85% in the judge's decision matrix. We need a counterweight. I can testify, I said. I can prove I'm sane. Subjective, she said. You'll be emotional. They'll use that. Anger equals dementia in their narrative model. She turned to me. Grandma, tomorrow you have to trust me. No matter what I say, no matter what I do, trust the math. What are you going to do? I'm going to introduce a new variable. Part 7. The courtroom. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish, old wood, and fear. It was freezing. Judge Harrison sat on the bench, a stern woman with glasses on a chain and a reputation for efficiency. David and Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table. Sarah was wearing a modest blue dress she must have bought yesterday. David wore a suit that fit him too well. Vance must have lent it to him. They held hands. They looked like grieving, concerned parents. We sat on the other side, me, Helen, and Maya. Maya wore her New York meeting blazer. She had her laptop bag on her lap. Vance began. He was smooth, practicing a rehearsed sorrow. Your Honor, this is a tragedy. David Hayes loves his mother, but her decline has been rapid. We have evidence of wandering, aggression, and financial mismanagement. And most importantly, she is isolating a minor child who has recently come into a great deal of money. We believe Evelyn is being manipulated, or worse, is unable to protect the child from her own delusions. He called Dr. Alpert. Alpert was devastating. He spoke with a soft, regretful authority. Mrs. Hayes scored a 14 on the cognitive assessment based on my observation of her behavior. She exhibits classic signs of early-stage Alzheimer's with paranoid delusions. She believes her son is a thief. She believes she is under surveillance. She is under surveillance, I whispered to Helen. Shh, Helen said. The video evidence, Alpert continued, shows a woman disconnected from reality. They played the clips on the big screen. Me wandering, me yelling, me staring at a blank wall. I was thinking. Judge Harrison watched, her face unreadable. She looked at me. I tried to sit up straight, to look lucid, but I could feel the sweat on my upper lip. I was terrified, and terror looks a lot like guilt. Then, it was our turn. Helen stood up. Your Honor, we have school records. We have financial statements showing Evelyn has managed the trust perfectly. That's all well and good, Judge Harrison interrupted, but I have a medical expert telling me this woman is incapacitated, and I have biological parents ready to step in. The standard here is the best interest of the child. If Mrs. Hayes is declining, I cannot leave a minor in her care. She's not declining, Helen argued. The video speaks for itself, the judge said. I am inclined to grant the temporary conservatorship pending a full state-appointed evaluation. My heart stopped. The world went gray. I couldn't breathe. They were going to take her. Your Honor, a voice cut through the room. It was Maya. She stood up. She looked small in the big room, but her voice was steady, clear. I request to speak. Vance jumped up. Objection! The child is a minor. She is the subject of the hearing. It would be traumatic for her to testify. I am the creator of the asset in question. Maya said, ignoring him and looking directly at the judge. And I have relevant data regarding the petitioner's credibility. Judge Harrison looked at Maya over her glasses. Data? I ran an analysis, Maya said, using Veritas. Vance laughed nervously. Your Honor, this is a computer game. It's a fantasy. Veritas is a forensic accounting algorithm licensed by Brandt Capital for $4 million, Maya said. It is not a game, and I ran it on the petitioners. Judge Harrison paused. She looked at David, who was suddenly sweating. She looked at Vance. I'll allow it, the judge said. Make it quick. Maya walked to the witness stand. She didn't look nervous. She looked like she was entering code. She plugged her laptop into the court's AV system. The large screen on the wall flickered, then resolved into a stark black interface with glowing white lines. The petitioners claim my grandmother is incompetent based on video evidence and financial mismanagement, Maya said. They claim their motivation is familial concern. I tested that hypothesis. She typed a command. A complex web of lines and nodes appeared on the screen. It looked like a constellation. This, Maya said, pointing to a pulsing red node in the center, is a shell company called North Star Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands. It was incorporated 3 days after the news of my licensing deal went public. She clicked. A line extended from North Star to a bank account in Delaware. The primary beneficiary of North Star is David Hayes. The room went silent. David shifted in his seat, pulling at his collar. That's a standard holding company for my business, David stammered. You don't have a business, Maya said calmly. You have debt. But North Star does have assets. It received a wire transfer of $50,000 last week. She clicked again. The line extended to another node. The source of the funds is a legal retainer account belonging to the firm of Vance & Associates. Vance turned a color I had never seen on a human being before, a sort of grayish green. Objection! Vance yelled, his voice cracking. This is hacked material. This is inadmissible. It's public record, Maya said, if you know where to look. And Veritas knows where to look. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Judge Harrison said, her voice like a whip. But that's just money, Maya continued. Let's look at the medical evidence. She brought up a new chart. Dr. Albert, she said, turning to the kindly old doctor, you stated under oath that you have never met my father before this week. That's correct, Albert said, though his voice trembled. Then why, Maya asked, does your wife's charitable foundation share a mailing address with my father's previous shell company in Nevada, a company that was dissolved in 2015, owing $40,000? She clicked. The addresses matched. Suite 404, 1200 Industrial Way. And, she continued, there is a wire transfer of $250,000 pending to Albert Medical Solutions from North Star. It is dated for tomorrow, the day after you expected to win this case. That is a consulting fee, Albert stammered. For a diagnosis? That's an expensive diagnosis. Vance was sweating profusely now. He started gathering his papers. But the smoking gun, Maya said, is the video. She typed. I analyzed the metadata on the clips submitted to this court. They were edited using Final Cut Pro on a computer registered to David Hayes. The timestamps were altered. She paused for effect. I anticipated this, she said, so I installed my own systems 6 months ago. High resolution, cloud-backed, audio-enabled. She clicked a file. Original porch footage.mp4. The screen changed. It showed the same night as the Wandering video, but this time the audio was crisp. Mittens! My voice rang out clear and worried. Damn cat! Come down from there! I was looking up at the oak tree. I wasn't lost. I was annoyed. The video switched. Me yelling at the mailman. "You're crushing the hydrangeas," I yelled. The camera angle was wider. You could see the mail truck's back tire grinding my flowers into the dirt. The courtroom was dead silent. The air crackled with electricity, the kind of silence that follows a lightning strike. Maya turned to the judge. Her face was blank, stripped of emotion, purely analytical. "Your Honor," she said, "my father and his associates attempted to steal $4.1 million by framing my grandmother for dementia. They engaged in a conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and elder abuse. They are not concerned guardians. They are grifters, and my algorithm just caught them." Judge Harrison looked at the screen. Then she looked at David. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to absolute, terrifying fury. She slowly took off her glasses. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, her voice low and dangerous, "sit down and don't move." She turned to the bailiff. "Lock the doors. No one leaves." She looked at me. "Mrs. Hayes, I apologize. Deeply. The court has failed you today, but we will rectify it." Then she looked at David. He was slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. Sarah was crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "The petition is denied with prejudice," the judge roared. "Furthermore, I am holding all three petitioners, Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Vance, and you, Dr. Albert, in contempt of court. I am referring this matter immediately to the district attorney for charges of fraud, wire fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. Dr. Albert, I will be contacting the state medical board personally before I leave this bench to ensure your license is suspended by end of business day." "But she's lying," David screamed, jumping up. "It's a computer trick. She's crazy. She's mute." "Sit down," the judge shouted, slamming the gavel. It sounded like a thunderclap. "Bailiff, take them into custody." I watched as the bailiff moved toward my son. I watched him get handcuffed. I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Just the satisfaction of a balanced equation. We walked out into the bright, blinding sun. The courthouse steps were white marble, reflecting the heat. I grabbed Maya's hand. I was shaking. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me weak. "You knew," I said. "You knew they were hacking the camera." Maya adjusted her laptop bag on her shoulder. She looked older than 17. She looked like a titan. "I suspected," she said. "I saw the IP login attempts on the router logs 3 months ago. I could have blocked them, but that would have just stopped them temporarily." "So you let them in?" "I needed a sample size large enough to prove intent," she said. "I needed them to commit the crime on record. If I stopped them early, it would have been your word against theirs. I needed data. I needed irrefutable proof." She looked at me. Her eyes were clear, dry, and fierce. "They underestimated the variables," she said. "They thought you were just an old woman, and they thought I was just a quiet girl. They failed to account for the structural integrity of this family." "Never lie to a mathematician," I whispered, squeezing her hand. "Exactly," she said, "or an engineer." We drove home in silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence of the past. It was the comfortable silence of a team that had won the championship. When we got home, the house felt different. The ghost of the threat was gone. The clock chimed in the hall. Bong, bong, bong. Maya didn't flinch. She looked at the clock. "We should oil the pendulum," she said. "It's a microsecond slow." I laughed. I laughed until I cried. Epilogue. The Constant. 6 months later, the dust has settled. Maya turned 18 last week. She moved into a sleek apartment downtown, closer to the financial district. It's a beautiful place. Concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, servers humming in a climate-controlled closet. She's not just licensing software anymore. She's the youngest division head in Brant Capital's history. She manages a team of 20 analysts, most of them double her age. David, Sarah, Vance, and Albert are awaiting trial. They were denied bail due to flight risk. Maya provided the court with evidence of David's searches for non-extradition countries. The district attorney is enjoying the case. It's open and shut. The data doesn't lie. On a Tuesday evening, I drove to Maya's apartment. I brought a lasagna, bubbling and heavy with cheese. We ate at her glass table, overlooking the city lights. It was quiet, but it was a companionable silence. The silence of two people who don't need words to understand the load-bearing capacity of their love. I stood up to clear the plates. "Grandma," she said. I turned. She was tapping on her tablet. "I was running a retrospective analysis on your pension," she said casually. "The Aerospace Union miscalculated your inflation adjustment in 1998. It was a rounding error in the COLA formula, compound interest. They owe you about $12,000. I filed the claim for you this morning." I laughed, a sound that felt rusty but good. Do you ever stop? Do you ever just rest? No. She looked up. A real smile, rare and beautiful, broke across her face. "They left me because I was too quiet. They didn't realize that quiet just means you're listening. I heard everything. I processed everything." My throat tightened. I walked over and kissed her forehead. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. "You were worth every quiet day, Maya. Every single one." She nodded, turning the screen toward me. It showed a graph, a line soaring upward into infinity. "I calculated the ROI on your investment in me," she said softly. "It's infinite." I drove home under the stars. The physics of the universe felt right again. Action and reaction, force and mass, love and loyalty. The house was quiet when I got there, but it wasn't empty. It was full of memories, full of victory. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Maya. "Thank you, Evelyn, for solving for X." So that's my story. If you were in my shoes, could you ever forgive a son who tried to erase you for a paycheck? Let me know in the comments. And remember, never underestimate a woman who knows how to do the math.